You don't have to go to that many places during one day, and you will most likely get at least one satisfaction survey. The saturation of measuring is quite high at the moment. We at Stockmann have approached this a little bit differently. We've been measuring our customer experience with a thing called emotional value index. We ask you basically that how did it make you feel when you visited the store, made a purchase, ordered online, browsed online. There are different touch points.
This is a trend we've seen now. Customers are very aware of the fact that their data is valuable. Customers want value for what they're giving, whether that's even feeling like their voice is heard, and that's affecting how the store experience is being transformed.
There has been a lot of very smart solutions, this kind of AI, like VR style mirrors or whatever touch screens in the fitting rooms. None of the solutions have become mainstream, in my opinion. Like the tech industry goes forward with the love of the technology, as in it should always be the fine balance between how and why customer actually wants to use it and what value does it bring for the customer.
Can you really improve customer experience without being able to measure it? How do you take something abstract and intangible like customer experience and put a number to it? The science and art of improving, measuring, and understanding customer experience has long fascinated me. Today, we've been really lucky to have Harri on the show. Harri is the head of customer experience and insights at Stockmann, and he'll share with us some of his experiences and learnings in the journey of really trying to understand and measure the customer experience at Stockmann, an iconic 160-year-old department store from the Nordics, based out of Finland. And together we'll unravel how, using their unique emotional value index, Stockmann has really changed the game around measuring and understanding customer experience in a brick and mortar retail context, moving away from standard, boring satisfaction surveys to really getting a grasp on how customers are feeling about the experience in store and exactly how those feelings are driving them to continue engaging with the brand and coming back over and over again. So listen up if you're into retail experiences, if you're a professional in the space or just passionate about how you feel and how you experience the shopping journey, and want to learn more about the future of CX, this is going to be a great one. Thank you. Hi, Harri. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on the Retail Spotlight today.
Thank you for having me.
Stockmann is a place that I'm personally very excited about. So I have a bit of a personal connection to Helsinki. I have a goddaughter there and a very close friend that I visit often. And we have a bit of a tradition that every time we're there, when I'm visiting there, we go to the food court and have a meal together because it's so nice. And, you have all the nice treats in there, etc. Do you call it a food court? Do you call it I don't know. What do you call that?
I think that's a perfectly good term because we have been investing quite a lot to have nice places to eat and hang out in the department store. So that is a good term.
Yeah, and yeah. So as a consumer, I find the place to be a magical experience in Helsinki, which can sometimes be a bit gray. And so I'm even more excited to hear from you today, Harri, about what magic goes on behind the scenes, what you guys are doing to make that amazing customer experience that we've all experienced or whoever's been there has experienced. And I have a lot of more questions around that. So yeah, very excited to have you on here. I'll shut up now and let you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a bit about yourself and about what you're doing at Stockmann.
Sure. And as said, thank you so much for the invitation. Happy to be here on this Monday afternoon. But yes, my name is Harri Nieminen. Harri can be also used if it's easier for people. I'm based in Helsinki, Finland, where Stockmann has the flagship department store. And I've been working at Stockmann now for 3 years, almost 3 years, and head of CX and loyalty. That's my role. So my background in general is in customer experience related roles in different companies and industries, customer experience, service design, customer insight, and especially actionable insight, I would say that. I'm very interested in customers, consumers, humans, and love to develop stuff that fits the needs and desires that the customers have. And that's something that I've been now doing at Stockmann for a few years already.
That's awesome. Customer experience or CX is a term we hear a lot,
Yeah.
but I don't think most people know what goes into that or what comes out of it. So, can you give us a bit of a view on what that means in the context of Stockmann? What is it that you're working on every single day, and what that does for us as customers in the store?
Sure, sure. Well, first of all, I know that there are also a lot of definitions for the term, but I'm just gonna now approach it from my personal point of view and the Stockman point of view. So, firstly, our customer promise that we have in the strategy is a feeling that lasts.
Hmm.
Stockman is more than 160 years old, and we have the history of being the place that has, especially in the old times when it was easier to introduce totally new things into a small market like Finland. We operate also in Estonia and Latvia, but these kind of smaller markets, nowadays everything is available everywhere all at once.
Hmm.
But we kind of want to draw from that legacy and heritage and be the place that kind of offers maybe the brands that are not available elsewhere in
Hmm.
Finland, offer inspiration and so forth. So for us, it's super important to understand what do the customers think about when they visit our stores, either in physical stores or online.
Hmm.
And that in the end is a summary of several things. Of course, like if you think about the brand in general, that all the interactions that you have with the brand or the retailer, like Stockmann, that you visit the store, you look around, you experience the service, you look at the inspiring products, inspiring displays. Like you spend some time maybe socializing and chilling in the store. So, kind of the summary and the feeling that you
Hmm.
get from all of that. It's not purely, in our case, about coming in, buying a thing that you
Hmm.
need, exiting, which is maybe the way that many people do groceries, for example. And that's another kind of experience that has to go well as well. But for us, it's a bit more emotional, inspirational, everything that happens in the store, encounters with people, things you see, things you hear, things you smell, whatever it might be. So, especially in the physical store, it's very diverse, what we call CX at Stockman.
You touched upon something really interesting there, right? About how for you the experience that the customer needs to have is not so much about the transaction, but about
Mm,
the the journey, right? The presence in
mm,
the store, what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. And I think that that's quite indicative overall of retail right now, where
mm,
we're seeing a lot of retail going away, but also a lot of new ideas coming in.
mm,
And when you have the online world as a huge transactional engine almost,
mm,
the physical store needs to do something different and unique to keep customers
mm,
coming and also serve that sort of experience to them. Y'all seem to be doing a great job of creating that experience, because my association with it, as I pointed out, is less about going and shopping something specific. I'm sure I've done a
mm,
lot of that, but about that feeling of like reconnecting with friends and family, and doing that
mm,
in a third place, right? Which is what is often missing nowadays in society.
mm,
And I love that, because I think retail, for me personally, but I think for a lot of people who experience it, has always been about more than just going and buying something. It's been about that
mm,
experience. And I think it's a good pressure at the moment that the industry is going under, where everyone is being forced to rethink their experience, their journey, not just as how do I sell more product, but how do I keep customers coming back and feeling good.
mm.
Um, in all of that, the thing I often wonder is, and maybe you have found a way to do this, um, is how do you measure that experience?
Firstly, I would like to reflect a little bit that we all know how many customer satisfaction surveys we get nowadays. you don't have to go to that many places during one day, and you will most likely get at least one satisfaction survey, whether it was online, offline, whatever it might be. So I think
Mhm.
the saturation of measuring is quite high at the moment. Uh, we at Stockmann have approached this a little bit differently for the past 3 years, actually. We've been measuring our customer experience with a thing called emotional value index. So it's about measuring the emotions of our customers. We use it online and offline in several touch points, and there are similarities to Net Promoter Score, which asks you that how likely would you recommend the
Mhm.
brand or the store. But we ask you basically that how did it make you feel when you visited the store, made a purchase, ordered online, browsed online. There are different touch points. But yeah, we are super interested in the emotional aspect because, as said, our customer promises a feeling that lasts, because
Mhm.
Stockmann has a heritage for more than 160 years that we've been kind of bringing interesting stuff to our customers. And we hear the stories that I've been visiting Stockmann with my parents or grandparents. So we kind of want to harness the value and the strength that is in the emotional connection that you have with your customers. And we measure that with emotional value index that we call EVI internally, in short.
Mhm.
So that has been something that has been super useful for us because it really gives us like a good understanding that what are the things where we are succeeding, what is driving the positive, strong positive emotions, or the mild positive emotions. That's interesting as well. That why wasn't it like super exciting? Mm, and on the other hand, that if there is something that is not working well, because of course we also have the certain issues that we struggle with, that we get to understand in detail what is frustrating for our
Mhm.
customers, or what makes them disappointed or mad. So understanding the emotion, I would say that is the key thing for us in order to offer the premium good experience.
I really like that because you're basically saying that instead of a blunt tool or fairly blunt tool where you say, would you recommend this or not?
Mm,
You're basically asking people to, in some ways, quantify their feelings
mm,
and help you understand, did they feel excited today? Did they feel satisfied? Did they feel emotional? Did they feel
mm,
frustrated, as you said? That resonates really well. I just yesterday did a survey. We ordered some new furniture from uh, a well-known furniture retailer from the Nordics, and there was a survey I had to fill in afterwards. And honestly, I was a bit frustrated from that experience, and I wanted to share that.
mm,
But I was sort
mm,
of pigeonholed into sets of questions that were just trying to put me in some sort of a scale, right? Of did
mm,
it happen at the right time? Did this happen? Did that happen?
mm,
And of course, eventually I got to the part where I could write my own text, and I did do that.
mm,
Um, but it still then comes down to how well one is able to express those emotions to actually
mm,
deduce what happened over there. And I think from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense to me to say, let's see if we say that emotions matter to you, then let's put our money where our mouth is and actually try and figure out what emotions we created for you.
mm, mm,
Um, what I'm curious to understand though is at the end of the day, it's still a business. You're still trying to sort of, grow the bottom line, grow the
mm,
top line. Um, was there some sort of insight in the past that connected emotion to business outcome that drove this decision? And today, have you been finding some sort of link between the EVI score, for lack of a better word, and what that's
mm,
doing for the business?
mm. Yeah, that's an excellent point because that's maybe a little bit of like a misunderstanding that some people might have at times, that if you start talking about emotions or measuring emotions, that it would be like a very soft value. So that's not the case. We didn't come up with the score ourselves. So we have
Mhm.
a partner, a company called Feedbackly, that has developed the concept or the measuring, and it's based on a lot of science. So their whole framework is based on scientific research and
Mhm.
modeling. and that's how the framework itself came to existence. And we have been, of course, now using it, as said, for 3 years and collecting data from the time. And yes, we can see the kind of obvious things that if EVI is high, or if the respondent gives a very positive feeling, yes, the average purchase is usually higher, the
Mhm.
average frequency of the shopping frequency is higher, and so forth. But what we are actually at the moment starting to analyze even in more detail, like I'm super interested myself to kind of validate, I call it the business value of
Mhm.
EVI, that how does it, for example, correlate with certain behavior. One hypothesis that I have, for example, is that if someone has been a Stockmann customer for a long time and has been very satisfied, so if one thing goes wrong, they most likely forgive us a little bit easier and
Mhm.
return. But let's say that if a totally new customer joins joins our loyalty program or starts shopping at Stockmann, and something goes wrong in the beginning, I kind of predict way smaller lifetime value for that kind of
Mhm.
customership. So these are the things that I would love us to be able to show in numbers as well, because that, of course, gives us a tool to prioritize the things that we do in the company.
Mhm.
Another example I want to share is that, let's say that we have certain pain points in all channels, online, offline, different parts of the journey, but how to quantify what are more critical pain points than the others, not just from the volume point of view, because of course, let's say Helsinki, the flagship store, gets absolutely a lot of feedback in numbers because it's the biggest place. We have the most transactions there, but still, could there be something that is kind of like, in a way, smaller in volume, but in some other way very critical for the business or the performance? So these are the things that we are now starting to investigate and hopefully get interesting insights that again help us to fine tune and focus our efforts of development in new places.
That's really interesting because you're basically saying, um, if we're able to find how certain indicators are affecting the experience, even if it's not from a volume perspective, but maybe
Mm,
it's still something that's bothering a lot of people, let's say,
mm.
you
And
have the
exactly
chance
like,
to get it out.
yeah, and just to say that, like, it might be that it doesn't come that often, but if we would identify reasons that, for example, makes makes someone stop shopping at Stockman completely, but then
Mhm.
on the other hand, there might be something that someone is kind of frustrated in the moment, but they forget it quite quickly as well. So
Mm.
then we could maybe kind of survive with that. So I think that's regarding measuring the CX or the experience in any way. The most critical thing that you always have to do something with the findings,
Yeah.
analyze it and use it, because I'm kind of afraid that there are quite many companies who measure the CX, the experience, with NPS or whatever survey you get. As a customer, you spend a lot of time answering those surveys, maybe nowadays a little bit more critical, like not critical in the answers, but critical in evaluating that to whom I want to give my time to. So I think
Absolutely.
us as like a service provider, we have the huge responsibility to use that and to act on that and actually to improve what we are doing. And that's why I think that to choose a metric that is usable and actionable for you, that's one thing. And then to actually build a process and and some kind of framework on constantly utilizing and improving on your operations based on the feedback.
Mm. I really like that, right? Because I think you touched upon a key point as a consumer. Um, you value your time
Mm,
fairly significantly, and then someone sends you this survey, and you have this feeling of, one, will this actually change anything going forward? And
mm,
then two, like, is this actually giving me a chance to express what actually went down?
mm,
And I think if you're able to use this in a meaningful way to actually affect the outcomes for the customers and not just collect the data, analyze it, and say, okay, good, we have a good score,
mm,
well done.
mm,
I think that's a unique opportunity. But what are some examples where you were able to use the insight to actually change something tangible in the experience? Do you have some concrete stories there to share?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say that one thing is to, of course, identify the pain points, how to minimize the pain that we are causing in some cases, or the frustration, but also to identify the strengths that you
Mhm.
have, because that's maybe also something that maybe is not recognized always as much as focusing on the things that are not going that well, because you need you need both. You
Sure.
want to kind of build like a strong identity. Like for us, I would say that getting personal service is the top one for both the most positive and sometimes also for the most negative feedback in the stores. And we've been kind of trying to analyze that. One way would be to kind of triple the amount of staff,
Mhm.
but it's not possible in nowadays, and in Finland the labor cost is high, so we have to be very cautious about that. So we kind of want to identify what are the touch points that, for example, in the store, where should we focus resourcing the staff that emphasizes the good experience, and then at the same time to identify that if the pain point is that customers give feedback, I cannot find staff, then we really have to think that, okay, is it about the appearance, or is it that the staff is kind of behind the furniture, or is it just non-existent at certain hours or something? So yeah, that's maybe one example, that we are carefully evaluating that the solution is not just to triple the amount of staff. We have to think that we have the right staff at the right time in the right place, like the product should be as well. Then another kind of very recent example that we've been working heavily around and in and developing heavily, I call it the after delivery experience. So
Mhm.
if you order something from Stockmann online and then you get the parcel, you get the package, then we send you an after delivery survey asking that, hey, how did the delivery or the process make you feel? Mm, and we have clearly identified, based on the data, that, for example, the stuff that goes out from our logistics center is delivered way faster than certain other orders. And
Mhm.
that kind of highlights that the delivery speed is one of the most critical aspects in the online orders. Of course, it has to be correct products in good condition and so forth. But even though the satisfaction is high, we have also seen that in certain cases, let's say if you order something a little bit more expensive, this
Mhm.
applies to the store experience as well, that if you buy an expensive jacket, for example, you maybe want it to be kind of wrapped nicely. You want it
Mhm.
in a nice box or a nice bag. And our process has been kind of the same for all items. Of course, we pack them so that the customer receives it in a way that it's in good condition, but we are seriously thinking that what would be the business smart rules to identify what delivery should be a bit fancier
A
in a way.
premium. Mhm.
Yeah, to kind of to compete with, let's say that if you order it from the luxury brand, for example,
Yeah.
directly, that then the box is really nice and they have a certain way to do it. Or then the third one to mention that the deliveries that are actually shipped from the department stores, because
Mhm.
quite big part of our online selection is located in the department store. Uh, so that process has been more tricky for us because it's more manual. Someone
Mhm.
has to check the order, someone has to pick up the order, pack it, send it forward, and so forth. So it has been slower, and that has been maybe the main pain point in that one
Mhm.
and causing frustration for our customers. So yes, we have now invested, for example, a lot in that this kind of automated packaging, which is kind of invisible for
Mhm.
customers, but we identified that that's one way for us to improve the process, because we know that the delivery time is the critical aspect in that. So what in each measurement, we measure in about 10 different touch points, our main measurements. So what is kind of the main cause for the positive or the negative in each one of these, and how to even emphasize the good ones, and of course try to minimize or get rid of the negative ones. So that's kind of the daily bread and butter, basic things that we are working around.
And the stories you've given, I've heard staffing, I've heard logistics, I've heard warehousing and delivery times. So it almost
Mm.
feels like what you're doing with this data and the CX sort of insights you're generating with the EVI will touch pretty much every area of the business.
That is true, and that is something that we kind of joke about with my team sometimes, that it's very nice that we are
Mhm.
actually part of basically everything that happens in the company, because in the
Yeah.
end CX is part of everything that happens. But of course it's like a tricky, it's a slippery slope, because in the end there is always so much more to do than you have time to do. And I'm a person who gets very excited about new things, so I kind of
Mhm.
personally have to kind of remind myself as well that even though that sounds very interesting and it would be lovely to deep dive into something new, but we always have to stop and prioritize and think that what is the most critical thing to do next. But yeah, definitely, I would say that as a CX developer or service designer or whatever title someone has, that's kind of a position where you get to deep dive into the whole organization in a good way.
And so, how do you then actually go about driving that change, right? Because I can imagine you're there with all these insights. Some of it applies to logistics, some applies to supply chain. So you need to manage all these different stakeholders.
Mm.
And do you stop at delivering the insight and say, here's a problem, here's an opportunity, here's what's working well? Do you take it a step further and help them redesign the service? Or do you actually like embed people in their team to actually get that work done? Like, how does this model work? Because I think it's quite unique what you're describing. And I'd be curious to understand, how this could be even applied in other organizations, for example.
I've been working in different organizations that have had different setup, and I've been testing different setups. So I think it partly always depends on, of course, the size of the organization and the maturity of customer centricity in the organization. So our work is partly very cultural, how to
Hmm.
develop the culture of customer centricity to kind of make people more aware what it means, sometimes even define the terminology, that what do we
Hmm.
mean by certain things, so to make sure that the basics are clear. um, but how we have done it at the moment is that we are like like a small team, our own team, not embedded in the different parts of the organization at the moment, but we have a little bit different approaches with different stakeholders. So for example, one good thing that we have done at Stockmann is that EVI, the metric, is a bonus criteria for everyone in the
Hmm.
company, because you get what you measure.
Yeah.
So bringing the CX metric as part of the bonus system or any kind of incentives, that gives already some interest and focus around it.
Hmm.
The other thing that we have always being very kind of keen on is to be very transparent and democratic, and open about the customer insights. So everything that we collect, let's call say the customer feedback survey, for example, um, every department store
Hmm.
can see online their own results all the time. Anyone
Okay.
who works in the store can see their own results, not the customer information to kind of keep it secure and so forth. But they see the EDI on like all day online. They see the open feedback that they are getting, and I think that's quite a powerful tool,
Hmm.
to communicate that how you guys are doing. You can see it here on your iPad, that these are the feedbacks that are coming in. Same thing with, let's say, the logistic, like you mentioned, that I have seen that we have this kind of huge screen in the logistics center that has the customer feedback on it that is coming in real time. So making it visible, sharing it openly, but of course it takes also a lot of kind of educating that, hey, this
Hmm.
is not just like a fun and interesting thing to do. But I would say that in our case, the importance of customer experience has been understood for decades, even more than 100 years. So that has helped a lot, that each department store is following very carefully their own feedback. If they see something there, they actively think themselves that, hey, we have recently gotten quite a lot of feedback on this, if it may be something negative. So how could we fix it? Or if they
Mhm.
say that, hey, we keep getting so good feedback about this way of working or this person, they highlight the reward the people in the store for the good feedback. So our role is to of course make sure that everything is working,
Mhm.
meaning that the surveys are working and developed if needed. But then we kind of approach the CX team from like a little bit like a bigger perspective, that we, for example, make these kind of summaries that how has 2024 gone so far
Mhm.
as a full year or half a year, for example, because each touch point looks at their own content and own results. So we kind of sometimes try to draw them a little bit to the higher
Big
level that,
picture.
hey, this
Yep.
is how Stockmann is doing, how we are doing in different touch points. And then we take part, of course, in certain strategic initiatives and like bigger projects that how do we involve the customers and so forth. But I would say that the daily follow-up of how things are going is nicely on the shoulders of different touch points, because I think that that's where it belongs.
That's beautiful. It makes a lot of sense when you think of organizations that really live customer centricity. You see that across the entire offering, right? It's not just
Mm, mm,
at a top level thing, but you see that in individual
exactly.
interactions with members of the team. You see that in how larger scale decisions are made. And,
Mm,
there's great examples of companies that have won the space they're in because of being putting the
mm,
customer at the center of things.
mm,
Now, when you talk about measuring this, you've spoken a lot about surveys.
mm,
Um, we also touched upon how customers often don't bother with surveys and stuff.
mm,
Have
mm.
you already been looking into, or are there tools you're using beyond surveys to measure some of this? Whether that's in store or online. Obviously, a lot of it is easier, but if I
Yeah.
think of the physical store, um, going from like the whole spectrum of facial recognition and emotions with AI
Mm.
to more simpler tools, what's in your toolkit?
Um, well, measuring wise, I would say that we are quite focused at the moment on the surveys that are up and running. Um, yes, I would say that we are living a very interesting times from technology point of view. I would say that anything that is related to user tracking and so forth has to be very transparent, because
Mhm.
I think that especially within EU, where we have quite tight regulation in many ways, and I believe it's a good thing to have a certain protection for the consumer and the customer. So yes, we do track, for example, people flows, and we
Mhm.
technically could maybe identify like individuals if we would build the capability to track their app usage in the store and so forth. We haven't done that yet, partly to that we just need to prioritize also that how what
Mhm.
to fix first. Now we've been building the current setup for 3 years, and now it's kind of stable. So I think yes, future is maybe more focus on bringing new aspects in the measurement as well. But I think that one measuring is in many ways quite quantitative.
Mhm.
We want to, of course, have the qualitative side there as well. And yes, we get something in the surveys and so forth, but we do put a lot of effort also involving the customers in the development. So let's say
Mhm.
that we are renovating a store. So we, of course, involve the customers in the process in a way that, hey, what is working before we even start the planning or finalize the plans, that what is working well in the current setup we had, where we invited people over to have like a discussion that we moderated, and then especially in those setups, it's called listening and reading between the lines that people are saying, that gives you the good insight that what is working well and what is not. Then we also have this kind of online community
Mhm.
for customers that we invite our customers to join. We have like 1,500 people there at the moment, so that's like a nice like semi-closed forum for customers to hear about the new ideas and keep their feedback and input, and in different kind of tools, not just surveys and so forth. But I would say that this comes, of course, a little bit more from the service design side, that how to involve the customers in the development. But I would definitely say like you refer to technology and the innovations that are coming at the moment are available already. And in some countries, there are very sci-fi solutions in use. So, of course, those are super interesting. But yeah, it has to be careful thinking around what to do, how to do it, what you want to get out of it. And especially, I would say that nowadays, when consumers and customers are quite aware of their rights, and they are getting even more critical, even with the surveys, that if I spend time answering a survey or showing my loyalty and giving you the purchase history, what do I get in return?
Yeah.
What is the value for me? And I think that's like a critical thing to clarify first internally, that if we start doing something that benefits us, how does it benefit the customer as well?
That makes a lot of sense. I think this is a trend we've seen now with also a lot of the businesses that we work with, that um, customers are very aware of the fact that their data is valuable. Their
Mm,
sort of
mm,
interaction is measured and monetized in some way or the other, and that's happening everywhere.
mm,
And they no longer want to just out of sheer benevolence share information, share
mm,
feedback, right? There needs to be some
mm,
incentive. I don't personally believe that that incentive needs to be monetary or transactional. Customers want value for what they're giving.
mm,
They're also not transactional for
mm,
everything, and are happy to get that value in other ways, whether that's even feeling like their voice is heard and that's affecting how
mm,
the store experience is being transformed.
mm,
Because if you've been doing this for 3 generations, going to Stockmann, and it's a once a Sunday tradition to go there and have something to eat and buy something
mm,
nice, you're no longer looking at it as a place to transact, but you're looking at it as a part of
mm,
your identity. And
mm,
that value can definitely come across in different ways.
mm.
um, and I think also there technology has a role to play,
Yeah.
where and we spoke about technology for measuring, and I agree, like there's that balance between you know uh, invasiveness and being able to measure, and respecting the rights
Mm,
has to be maintained. um, are there trends or technologies you see, on the other hand, that are emerging that would actually help, especially a retailer like Stockmann, impact the customer experience, right? Where do you see the role of technology, especially in the physical world, going forward?
mm. In our case, I would say that the in-store experience is partly, of course, about the selection that we
Hmm.
offer there in the store. So anything that helps us to curate more accurate, more business smart, and still inspiring and interesting selection for our customers. And that's, of course, one aspect that has it kind of happens behind the scenes, that how to we utilize the foresight and the customer insight, and also, of course, the trends in general. Then again, within the store, I would say that the hygiene level starts to be these solutions where you know how to navigate, for
Hmm.
example. This is a little bit of an issue for us at the moment, that our flagship is over 50,000 square meters. So it's very big for a department store. Our local stores are a little bit like way smaller, but still decent in size. But things are moving around all the time, for
Hmm.
example. So how to make sure that like RFID helps us to also locate the items. So how do we open that to customers, that they can locate the items themselves if they want to be not kind of helped by the staff that we have. I've seen quite a lot of solutions. Let's say a fitting room is a crucial part of the journey. The conversion is heavily affected already from the decision that do I want to fit on or try on this piece of cloth or not. So
Hmm.
yes, there has been a lot of very smart solutions, these kind of AI, like VR style mirrors or whatever touch screens in the fitting rooms.
Hmm.
Mm, None of the solutions have become mainstream, in my opinion, so far. I think it has been more about being cool, having something cool.
Sure.
Um, but those are definitely like interesting and intriguing. And I would maybe say that quite often the industry, meaning like the tech industry, goes forward with the love of the technology and the
Mhm.
solution itself, as in it should always be the fine balance between how and why customer actually wants to use it and what value does it bring for the customer. So not many people are super excited about new gadgets. A certain part of people are, but I have also seen the cases where someone doesn't want to go into a fitting room because it looks too
Mm.
hi-fi, too scientific. So
Right. It's
how
like,
to
is this
bring it
camera watching me
in.
while I get dressed, right? Yeah.
Exactly, or like, I don't know how to use it, or it seems complicated. Uh, the fear of embarrassing yourself, that how does it work and so forth. So how to balance with the technology, that the technology is just like an enabler. It's not
Mhm.
the purpose itself, but is it about saving me time, making it more convenient, giving me the option to choose from whatever and so forth. So understand the value, because that's the thing that we try to create in the end, customer value and the business value.
Yeah, the classic innovator's dilemma that us tech founders have, right? Where it's like there's this cool new technology with which you can do all of these things, and
Yeah.
then there's the customer and what they want, and sometimes you kind of have to listen to the customer, but sometimes you also have to show them a better way of doing things, and I think
Mhm.
it goes hand in hand.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and you touched upon like AI, but I recognize that earlier you also mentioned that you found that having more staff in certain areas, having that
Mhm,
interaction really helps. And this is a problem, a macro trend that we're facing
mhm,
across Europe, at least at the moment, right? That good, qualified, customer-minded staff is harder and harder to get, or very expensive.
mhm, mhm,
So it almost feels like an area where technology will have to play more of a role.
mhm,
Um, and then it's a question of, do we end up with AIs that we're interacting with? How does that
mhm,
affect the experience? And how do we create something that still retains the magic of a 160
mhm.
year old experience while transitioning into the future? And I feel like that could be a
Mhm.
topic for a whole other podcast itself.
Yeah, that's true.
It's an area that I personally find very exciting. Also, because
Mhm,
we see this more and more in the behavior of consumers as well,
mhm,
partly because they're frustrated by bad service, but partly because, especially if you look at Gen Z, Alpha onwards,
mhm.
they're born inside devices practically, right? So
Yeah.
there's an iPad in the hand from the moment they can crawl, and they're used to looking up information or discovering that digitally and not asking human beings for that information.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
then you have in the same store someone who's 65 years old who wants to use their device possibly as little as they can and wants to actually have that
mhm,
human interaction. And how do you serve both those people, right? Someone who wants a digital
mhm,
first self-serve experience, and someone who wants to be spoken to in a warm, respectful, friendly way.
mhm.
Um, both have a need, both needs to be fulfilled, and yeah, there's a lot of interesting challenges around that.
Yeah. And one thing I wanna touch upon in that one is that, again, like knowing the customer as well as possible, because we can, for example, see that especially the young customers have high need for personal service in certain categories. Let's say
Mhm.
when you're buying your first suit, somehow you need to shorten the pants or whatever you need to usually do. But if you are not accustomed of buying suits that well, that much or that often, you kind of want to have the personal service. Because again, if you know what you want and you need, you quite easily order it online, because you kind of value the convenience in that, that
Yep.
you don't have to go somewhere unless you kind of go and want to get inspired. But regardless of the age, I would say in certain categories, it's interesting to see that the need for the human service is very high. Cosmetics, the same thing. That if
Mhm.
you wanna find a new shade for the foundation, even though there are very cool apps nowadays and analyzers that you can use your phone with to choose the one, quite often people come in and they say that thank you for the good service, that I would have chosen the wrong one if I wouldn't
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
gotten the guidance and the help from the experienced person that was in the store. So I think that's an interesting that sometimes we assume quite many things based on, for example, the age or the gender. But when you kind of deep dive into the customer insight, you start do the segmentation, for example, of the customer base. Then you have to be very sensitive that you don't let your assumptions and stereotypes run too strongly, and instead kind of really get to know the customer that you have visiting your store.
I love that. Let the data guide you and not the assumption.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. It's a fine
and
balance.
on the note of getting to know people, getting to know individuals, we're slowly nearing the end of our pod, and we always like to close with a rapid fire round where I'll
All
ask
right.
you a few questions. Not that much about CX, but more about you, Harry, and
Sure.
give our audience also a chance to get to know you a little bit more in a very quick way.
Mhm.
We're going to start with that right now.
Yeah.
All right. What's your all-time favorite TV show?
Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Lovely. Uh, on topic, if you could have a superpower, which one would you choose?
Flying.
Flying. Okay, very nice.
Yeah, flying high.
And since we also know that you love traveling, what would be, if you could fly to right now, the destination you would fly to right now?
Maldives.
Maldives, beautiful. Looking at the weather here in Berlin, I feel the same right now as well.
We here in Finland yesterday celebrated an event called the greyest day of the year. So that tells something about the season.
All right. And then my last question to you, one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self.
Be curious. Mm, that
Well,
helps
thank
you.
you for
That helps you far.
that helps you far indeed. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for scratching a lot of my curiosity today in the pod. I really enjoyed talking with you. And I think this is going to be a very interesting one for our audience as well. Everyone who's asking themselves, what happens to all of those surveys I fill in? Well, now you've heard it from the man. It's actually going into making the experience a lot better. Thank you so much, Harry, for being with us. And
Thank you.
look forward to possibly having you on again and talking more about the future. This was a great experience.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Retail Spotlight. Tell us how you found it, whether you're in the retail industry and want us to dive deeper into certain topics or invite certain guests, or if you're a passionate shopper enjoying a behind-the-scenes look, we want to hear from you. Hit us up with your comments, likes, and feedback. And if you know someone who loved this episode, please share it with them. Lastly, if you want to stay informed when we go next live with the next episode, make sure to hit the subscribe button. See you next time.